I thought renting a small room above her garage would be simple. Pay rent, keep quiet, move on. But the first time she smiled at me and said, "Rent isn't the only thing I expect on time," something in her voice stayed. Now I can't tell if I'm living in her house or slowly falling into her silence. I moved into her place because it was cheap and close to work. That's all it was supposed to be. A small room above her garage, with creaky stairs and a door that never fully closed unless you slammed it. She called it a temporary arrangement. I told her I'd be out in a few months. Neither of us believed that. She was my landlady, Ms. Hartley, mid-40s, maybe older. The kind of woman who didn't need to say much to be noticed. There was always something composed about her. The way she tied her hair back loosely, or how she spoke without rushing, like silence was part of her rhythm. The first time I met her, I was carrying boxes up those stairs. She stood at the bottom, holding a mug of coffee, watching me like she was trying to figure out what kind of tenant I'd be. "Rent's due on the 1st, she said. I nodded a little too fast. "Got it." Then she smiled. A quick, crooked thing, and added, "Rent isn't the only thing I expect on time." I froze, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Playful, maybe teasing. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that. She turned and walked back inside before I could think of anything to say. For a week, I barely saw her. I'd hear her moving around downstairs, heels clicking across the hardwood, the clink of glass, a phone call that ended with a soft laugh. Every sound felt sharper when I knew it was her. One afternoon, the water heater broke. I knocked on her door, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out uneven. She opened it halfway, wearing an oversized sweater, sleeves pushed up, hair still damp from a shower. "What's wrong?" she asked. I told her about the heater. She sighed and grabbed a wrench. "Guess it's time to see if I still remember how to fix things." She crouched next to the pipes, muttering under her breath as I stood behind her, holding the flashlight. Her perfume mixed with the metallic scent of rust and soap. Every few seconds, she'd glance back at me short, assessing looks that made my pulse stumble. When the pipe finally hissed to life again, she exhaled in relief. "There. Not bad for an old woman, huh?" "You're not old," I said too quickly. Her eyes met mine. For a second, neither of us moved. The air felt heavier, thicker somehow. She tilted her head slightly, almost like she was trying to read what I hadn't said. Then she laughed, a soft, nervous sound, and stood up, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Well, I'll add plumber to my resume." I smiled, pretending to focus on the fixed heater, but the space between us still hummed. She noticed it too. I could see it in the way her fingers lingered on the wrench before setting it down. "Thank you for the light," she said, her tone back to business. "You can head upstairs. I'll check the rest later." I nodded but didn't move right away. Her eyes flicked toward mine one more time. Not cold, not warm either, just searching. I finally left, pretending not to feel her gaze following me up the stairs. That night, I sat on my bed with the light off, listening to the faint hum of her footsteps below. The heater gurgled, the pipes clanked softly, small, ordinary sounds. And yet, every one of them carried her in it. I kept replaying her voice in my head. That first smile, that teasing line. "Rent isn't the only thing I expect on time." That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. It had been 2 weeks since the night she fixed the heater. 2 weeks of polite distance. Morning nods, short hellos, and the faint smell of her coffee drifting through the vents. I told myself I imagined that moment between us, that maybe she didn't even remember it. But then, one Sunday afternoon, she knocked on my door. "Can you help me move a few boxes?" she asked. "They've been sitting in the garage since forever." Her tone was casual, but her eyes weren't. They lingered for a second too long, like she wasn't sure if she wanted me to say yes or no. The garage was warmer than usual. Dust floated in the sunlight coming through the narrow window. She tied her hair up, loose strands brushing her neck, and there was something tired or maybe fragile in the way she exhaled before lifting a box. "You don't have to," I started. "I like keeping busy," she cut in, a faint smile softening the interruption. We worked quietly for a while. The sound of shuffling cardboard filled the space between us. Every now and then, she'd stop, touch her wrist, or rub her temple like her thoughts were heavier than the boxes. I asked, "You okay?" She looked up, caught off guard. "Yeah, just long week." I wanted to ask more, but she turned away, reaching for another box. Inside, I saw a pile of old photo frames, a younger version of her, a man beside her, and a boy who looked about my age now. She noticed my eyes drift toward it and quickly closed the box. "Old life," she said quietly. "Doesn't fit anywhere anymore." Something in her voice cracked just a little, not enough for most people to notice, but enough for me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she brushed her hands off on her jeans, smiled and said, "You should probably go before I find more things for you to carry." I hesitated. "You sure?" Her smile softened, not playful this time, just tired. "I'm sure." I took a step toward the door, but then she said, "Hey," and I turned. She was standing by the window, the sunlight cutting across her face. Her eyes looked distant, but not cold, like she was somewhere between wanting to speak and holding it all in. "Thanks," she said, just that one word. Her hand brushed against mine as she took the last box. It wasn't intentional, it didn't have to be. The warmth from her fingers stayed long after I pulled mine away. She looked at me then, like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. It started raining that night. Not a soft drizzle, but the kind that beats against the windows and makes the whole world feel smaller. I was half asleep when I heard her footsteps on the stairs. A slow, uncertain rhythm. Then a knock. "Sorry." Her voice came through the door, muffled but steady. "The power's out. Do you still have that flashlight?" I found it on the table and opened the door. The hallway was almost completely dark, except for the dim orange from the storm outside. She stood there holding a candle, her hair damp, sweater clinging slightly to her shoulders. "Come in," I said. "You'll get soaked." She hesitated, just long enough for it to mean something, and then stepped inside. The air smelled like rain and coffee. We sat on opposite sides of the small table, the candle flickering between us. For a while we didn't speak, the kind of quiet where words would only ruin it. "You'd think I'd be used to this," she said eventually. "Living alone during storms, I mean, but it still gets to me sometimes." There was a faint tremor in her voice, the kind that people hide behind humor. I smiled a little. "Guess it's good you've got a tenant now." "Guess so." She smiled back, tired but warm. "Though I'm not sure you signed up for power outages and emotional confessions." "I don't mind," I said. "It's kind of nice, actually." Her eyes lifted at that. They didn't move away. The storm cracked outside, a loud, splitting sound that made her flinch. Without thinking, I reached out, steadying the candle before it toppled. My hand brushed hers. Just a second, but enough to burn. She didn't pull away immediately, just looked down at where our fingers touched, her breath catching, her lips parting slightly as if to speak. But then her phone buzzed. She moved fast, picking it up. The light from the screen lit her face, and whatever softness had been there vanished. Her expression hardened, just a flicker of something private flashing through her eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly. "It's nothing," she said, setting the phone face down. But her voice had changed, distant, careful. "I should go check the breaker. You should probably get some rest." I didn't believe her, but I nodded anyway. "Want me to help?" "No," she said a little too firmly. Then softer, "You should go now." I stood there, unsure what to do. The candlelight caught the side of her face. Tired, beautiful, conflicted. My hand was halfway to hers when she turned toward the door, not looking back. "I'll see you in the morning," she said. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there for a long time, listening to the rain, my heart still somewhere between her words and that silence that followed. She told me to go, and I did. But only my body left that room. We didn't talk for 3 days after the storm. She wasn't avoiding me exactly. She was just quieter, the kind of quiet that doesn't happen by accident. When I'd pass her in the hallway, she'd smile politely, ask if the lights were holding up, then vanish back into her room before I could say much. I told myself to leave it alone, that she probably just needed space. But every night, I'd hear the faint sound of her moving around downstairs, pacing, opening and closing drawers, like someone searching for something that wasn't there. On the 4th evening, I finally knocked on her door. She opened it halfway, eyes soft but wary. Hey, I said. "Just wanted to check if everything's okay. You've been quiet." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." Her living room looked lived in but lonely. A half-finished cup of tea, a blanket draped over the couch, a few books scattered across the table. She sat down, motioning for me to take the chair across from her. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. Then she said, almost to herself, "You're too kind. That's your problem." I frowned. "My problem?" She smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the cup in her hands. "You look at people like you actually see them. That's dangerous." I leaned forward. "Is that what you think this is? Dangerous?" Her gaze flicked up, quick, defensive. "Whatever this is, it shouldn't be happening." The word "this" hung between us, unspoken but heavy. I didn't argue. I didn't even know what to call it. The long glances, the too long silences, the quiet gravity that kept pulling us toward each other. "I didn't mean to make things complicated," I said finally. I stopped, searching for words that wouldn't sound stupid. "You just care," she said softly. "That's the worst part." I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't composed like before. Her hair was loose, her expression unguarded, her fingers tapping the side of her cup as if trying to calm herself. "Tell me," I said quietly, "what are we doing?" Her eyes lifted, shimmering under the lamp's dim light. For a second, she looked ready to answer. But then something in her face shifted. A flicker of fear, or maybe recognition. She set the cup down carefully and leaned back, her voice breaking into a whisper. "I don't know." And that was it. The truth in its simplest, most painful form. I didn't move. Neither did she. We just sat there. Two people caught somewhere between want and restraint, pretending silence could make sense of what words never could. When she finally looked up again, her eyes were wet but steady. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. The morning after that conversation, she was gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, her lights were off, and the note on my door said only, "Won't be home for a few days. Keep an eye on the place." No name, no explanation. Just her handwriting, neat, careful, like even distance had to be done politely. I tried not to think about it. Tried to focus on work, on anything that didn't sound like her laugh or smell like her perfume in the hallway. But every night felt heavier without the quiet hum of her moving around downstairs. When she finally came back, it was raining again. I heard the door close softly and went downstairs before I could talk myself out of it. She was standing in the living room, hair damp, coat half unbuttoned. She looked exhausted, not physically, but in the way people do when they've spent too long pretending to be fine. "You're back," I said, voice lower than I meant. She smiled faintly. Barely. I noticed a folded photo in her hand. Edges frayed, colors faded. She followed my gaze and sighed. My son, she said quietly. It's his birthday today. I hesitated. You went to see him? She nodded, then looked away. He doesn't talk to me much. Not since the divorce. I guess I stopped being the kind of mother he wanted. The words were soft, but they hit hard. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just listened as she sat down, the photo still clutched in her hand. You remind me of him, she said suddenly. Not in how you look, more in how you try to fix everything. He used to do that too. Always thought love meant solving things. Her voice cracked on that last word. Without thinking, I sat beside her. The air between us felt fragile, like one wrong move could break it. He'll come around, I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You say that like you believe it. I do. She looked at me then, not as her tenant, not as some kid renting a room, but as someone who saw her, flaws and all. Her hand loosened around the photo. I could see the faint outline of a boy in a baseball cap, her arm wrapped around him. The past, still warm in her grip even after all those years. She took a long breath, one that sounded like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. After that night, something between us shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, but like a door quietly unlocking somewhere neither of us had noticed before. She stopped pretending she didn't see me in the mornings. Sometimes we'd have coffee together in the kitchen. No words at first, just the sound of the kettle and the clink of mugs. And then, slowly, the kind of small talk that only feels simple because both people are hiding bigger things beneath it. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the porch, watching the sky fade into violet. A half-empty bottle of wine sat beside her, the glass untouched. Long day? I asked. She didn't look over. Long life? I sat next to her. The wood was cool beneath us, the air heavy with the smell of rain. For a while we just listened to the wind, to the creak of the old swing, to the silence that had somehow stopped feeling uncomfortable. I used to think love was supposed to feel certain, she said finally. That if it was real, you'd just know. And now I think maybe real things aren't certain at all. Maybe that's what makes them real. Her words sat between us like confession and warning at once. She turned her head then, her eyes finding mine. They didn't ask. They didn't invite. They just stayed. Long enough for me to forget how to breathe. I didn't reach for her. I didn't need to. The air itself seemed to draw us closer. A slow, inevitable gravity. You shouldn't look at me like that, she whispered. How am I looking? Like you know me. Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't turn away. I wanted to tell her I didn't mean to, that I didn't know how to stop, that every quiet glance, every late-night silence had become something too big to ignore. But I didn't say any of that. I just sat there, close enough to feel her warmth. Her hand rested on her knee, fingers trembling slightly. I placed mine near hers, not touching, just near enough for the air between us to feel electric. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then she did, just barely. Her pinky brushed mine, the smallest, most fragile movement I've ever felt. And suddenly, words didn't matter. We stayed there, both pretending the night hadn't changed anything, knowing it had. The quiet between us wasn't silence anymore. It was understanding. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down. And that was louder than any I love you ever could be. It's been months since that night on the porch. Seasons changed, neighbors came and went, but somehow the space between her door and mine stayed the same. Still quiet, still charged, still ours, even if no one else would ever understand what that meant. We never talked about what happened. Not directly. She'd hand me rent receipts with the corner of a smile, ask about work, remind me to lock the gate. Ordinary words that somehow carried everything we couldn't say aloud. But something in her had softened. I could feel it in small ways. The way she lingered by the kitchen counter while I made coffee. The way her laughter, when it came, Didn't sound like she was apologizing for it anymore. One evening, I found her sitting by the window, reading. The golden light caught in her hair, her glasses slipping down the bridge of her nose. She looked up and smiled. A quiet, unguarded smile that felt like an answer to a question I hadn't asked. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," she replied. "You look tired. Long day." She nodded. "Stay for a bit." So I did. I sat on the couch across from her, watching the dust dance in the last bits of sunlight. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We didn't have to. The silence wasn't about avoidance anymore. It was comfort. She closed her book eventually and said, almost absently, "I used to think I was done feeling things this deeply, that maybe that part of life just ends after a while." I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "Maybe it doesn't end. Maybe it just waits." She looked at me for a long moment, that familiar, quiet searching, then whispered, "Maybe you're right." Outside, the world kept moving, cars passing, the wind brushing against the windows. But inside, time had slowed to something simple, real. There was no confession, no grand moment, just two people, sitting close enough to feel the warmth of something fragile and true. Later, when I went upstairs, I caught my reflection in the stairwell mirror. The same hallway, the same light, but I didn't feel like the same person who'd moved in months ago. Because somewhere in all those silences, all those almosts, I'd learned something I hadn't known how to name. I didn't just fall for an older woman. I fell into something rare, something true. And I think in her own quiet way, she did too. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?